Nothing is worse than spending a ton of time, money, and effort installing a new aftermarket subwoofer only to have it not sound good when you power it up for the first time. Luckily though, the main issues that usually lead to poor bass performance just come from poor planning decisions. So if we can avoid these common mistakes, we will be off to a great start for achieving great sounding subwoofer bass. Hey, what's going on everyone? I'm Mark. Welcome to Car Audio Fabrication. Here on this channel, together we learn how to master car audio and how to design, build, and install our dream car audio system. On this channel, I have tons of subwoofer build content, but we can't get to the build if we don't first have a good plan. So let's dive in and discuss the common subwoofer planning mistakes to avoid. Planning mistake number one, and this is by far the most common mistake, is simply not planning for enough space for our subwoofer bass. I know it's easy to see those nice, shiny, brand new big subwoofers and want to make that impulse buy decision. But it's critical that we do some early investigating to make sure that we have enough physical space in our vehicle that we are okay with giving up for them to perform to their full potential. So when we're shopping for our subwoofers, one of the first things that we need to look at is the required air volume. Now, the most common enclosure types are sealed and ported, so it's good to look at those specs first. And one of my favorite ways to compare and look at those specs is by using the website Crutchfield. On the Crutchfield website, we can easily narrow down subwoofers by brand, size, and many other attributes, but also easily use the compare functionality to compare ideal enclosure sizes to get a better feel for what sort of space we need for each subwoofer. Crutchfield is a sponsor of the channel, but I've personally used them for a long time, long before I started this channel in 2011, and I've always had a great experience with their US-based customer support team and with their fast, standard 2 business days shipping. They've also been cool enough to help out our community with some special savings that you can take advantage of on your next car audio purchase. You can learn more at the links down in the video description. So once you know those specs for the air volume of the subwoofers, you can take some measurements in the vehicle and get an idea if you have enough space to work with. A quick example for you, let's say that we have a space that's 30 inches wide, 16 inches deep, and 16 inches tall. Based on using wood materials that are 3/4 of an inch thick, I first subtract 1.5 inches from each of those dimensions because you have 2 sides on each side of the enclosure, and I can then multiply those 3 values. So I'll take 28.5 times 14.5 times 14.5. This gives me 5,992 cubic inches, and I want to convert that to cubic feet, so I'm going to divide by 1,728 cubic inches. That's how many cubic inches are in 1 cubic foot. And with this quick approximation, this tells me that I have about 3.4 cubic feet of air volume internally to work with. Now, I want to stress that this is in fact an approximation. You do, of course, need to account for other things like bracing and the actual displacement of the subwoofer inside the box, but for getting a feel for what is possible for your system, it's a quick, easy math equation to do to determine what is possible. Let's say that we wanted to run 2 subwoofers in that space. We can simply divide that air volume estimate of 3.4 cubic feet by 2. That tells us we have about 1.7 cubic feet of airspace to work with sealed for each subwoofer. Now, what about for a ported enclosure? The math there gets a little bit more complex, but it's still very easy to approximate. I have a full video about that process on the channel. Also, don't forget, if you need assistance with a subwoofer enclosure design where I do all of the math for you, I can personally assist you with that on my website. Now, the next huge planning mistake for getting a great sounding subwoofer system in your car is choosing the wrong voice coil impedance when you buy your subwoofer. Again, this is a common one. People get excited to buy the subwoofer and don't plan how they will match the subwoofer's impedance with the amp. Different subwoofer models often have options for the voice coil impedance that you can choose. A common option out there is either a 2 ohm or a 4 ohm voice coil. Manufacturers design subwoofers with different voice coil options so that you have more options for system design based on if you wanted to use multiple subwoofers or depending on how you want to pair the subwoofer or subwoofers with your amplifier. As an example, let's say that you buy an amplifier that's rated at 500 watts watts at 2 ohms. But then let's say you buy a subwoofer that's rated for 500 watts RMS, so you did good matching the power, but it is a 4 ohm single voice coil subwoofer. The only possible wiring configuration would be to run that subwoofer on that amplifier at 4 ohms, which means you're not going to get that full 500 watts RMS power rating. That subwoofer and amplifier combo would still work, but you wouldn't be getting the full potential out of the amp. Odds are this would potentially leave you desiring more output from the system. So the proper selection of the subwoofer's impedance to match your amplifier during your planning process is critical, but this can get more complex with dual voice coil subwoofers and multiple subwoofers. So once again, I have a related video that you guys could check out that goes into detail here on the channel. The next common subwoofer system planning mistake that I see is simply purchasing an amplifier subwoofer combination that far exceeds the electrical capabilities of the vehicle. Simply put, it takes power to make power. Again, I know that 3000 watt RMS subwoofer and amplifier combo looks alluring, but if you combine that with a vehicle that has a stock 70 amp alternator, you're not going to have a good time. Depending on the vehicle and application, proper electrical system upgrades must be considered. Again, this is a topic that requires diving deeper, but I do have a full detailed video here on the channel. Now, while there are, of course, other subwoofer system planning mistakes that can be made, the final one that I want to talk about here is simply not considering what orientation you're going to fire the subwoofer in the vehicle that will best suit your application. First off, let's avoid this idea that you have to aim the subwoofers at your listening position, as oftentimes that does not achieve the best performance. Now, obviously, if we're getting a simple subwoofer enclosure that is already made, this isn't as big a deal, as we can easily reorient the enclosure as needed to test it in the vehicle. But if we are going the custom route and we're going to be using an enclosure that's going to take up most of the available space that we're allowing and fit tightly within the vehicle, we do need to make a decision on which direction to face the subwoofer and if we're going ported, the port. If possible, I always recommend building a test enclosure and running some performance tests while taking acoustic measurements to assist in planning. The process for that is shown in this related video. But I understand that not everyone has the gear to be able to run those tests, along with the fact that you have to have a test enclosure to test everything out, so it may be a good idea to reach out to an expert and see if they have some opinions for you on your make and model vehicle, or to even reach out to others in the car audio community that may have the same make and model vehicle as you and see what subwoofer directions and orientations have worked best for them. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we have tons of subwoofer related content here on the channel. Here's some more options for you on screen. Don't forget, for your next car audio purchase, the planning process is made easy with our show sponsor, Crutchfield. You can learn more and take advantage of a special offer so that you can save on your next purchase at the links down in the video description. A big thanks to them, along with Jerry and the rest of the Patreon membership team, for making these videos possible. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching.